Good afternoon and welcome to IIRS. Today's topic is use of geoinformatics in forest fire risk assessment and monitoring. I'll be breaking this or I'll be structuring this presentation into three parts. What we do during the fire scenario, what is done in the pre-fire scenario, and what is done in post-fire scenario for monitoring, mitigation, and predicting the forest fires in India. So here's the structure of the presentation. First is why we need such an information, how the geospatial sciences is used for fire monitoring during the fire scenario, how we use it to predict the probable locations of forest fire or model the forest fire scenarios, and in the post-fire, how do we assess the damage to the ecosystem as well as their mitigation plan. And finally, I will be ending with a few slides on future perspective, how we see in future the forest fire monitoring will be done using geospatial technology. So, first I start with the need for the forest fire system. See, around 50% of Indian forests are prone to fires, and these are basically random. Although I won't say it is very, very random, because among this 50% of the Indian forests, almost 99% of the forest fires which we see today are due to some or other anthropogenic causes. So there is a pattern in this forest fire, but the location of those fires is random. And of course there are ecological and economic consequences of forest fires. We lose billions of amount as a result of forest fire for the forest resources, as well as to the amount spent in mitigating the damages caused. So why do we need to have it? And what is the need for such an elaborate system? We need it for active fire detection and forest fire progression for the control operations. We also need it to model the forest fire spread as an early warning to aid in the control. We also need to assess the burnt areas for critical ecosystems like, say, the national parks. Then we also needed to have a forest fire risk or proneness mapping, and it also gives us an indication of the forest fires and trace gas emissions, which has a repercussion in the global climate, especially in the CO2 emission. There are a new number of global forest fire information systems, such as one you can see on your monitors. We have a website which is active, sponsored by ESA. Another is a Web Fire Mapper Global, which is from Australia. They all adopt multi-sensor, remote sensing, GIS, web-based information network, and also an extensive ground-based information network. So what is the status of our forest fire management systems? Like as you see in the slide, for burnt area mapping, the contribution of remote sensing is almost 90%, and ground it's 10%. This technology is operational, but it has very less implementation as on date. Then we have the burnt area progression, wherein also we can use remote sensing technology to detect it almost up to 90%. This is also operational. Then active fire location, this is an operational aspect. Fire proneness assessment, this is also an operational. Fire spread models is still under R&D. And this involves a lot of ground-based and other ancillary information. like meteorological information, the amount of fuel loads which is there, etc. And finally, the ecological damage assessment is also an operational aspect. Now, if we come to the sensors or the satellite sensors which are used to detect the forest fires, active fires, I would say, we have around around 7 or 5, I would say, which are extensively used in active fire detection. The most commonly used are the MODIS sensors, which is on the Aqua and Terra satellites, and also the NOAA AVHRR, Aster, BIRD, and a Defense Meteorological Satellite DMSP. But the problem is they are all very coarse resolution. That is, you can detect a forest fire pixel of 1 kilometer. And in that 1 square kilometer, the exact location of forest fire cannot be predicted or detected using these sensors. Apart from that, we have IRS AWIPS, WIPS, Spot VGT, and Landsat TM, which Spot VGT, which can detect the fire progression. The Landsat TM and LIS3, which are high resolution data, can help in identifying the episodic burnt area assessment. And these are the coverage capability of different satellites and the time of their passes. During daytime, we have MODIS, Aqua, and what you see in the different blue colors. Then we have the NOAA 17 and NOAA 18, and during night we have DMSP. So, whenever there is a burning, forest fire burning, it can be detected only during these time, at the time of the pass. If the fire is occurring beyond the time of these passes, it may not be detected. This is one of the drawbacks in the current forest fire detection using remote sensing. But very soon we will be having a geostationary satellite imager in the thermal region, which can give us the forest fire locations every, say, the temporal duration may be something like half an hour. Now I am coming to some of the images, how you can detect it. You can see the right side is the MODIS Terra of March 2005. This is an area in central Andhra Pradesh, Nagarjuna Sagar Tiger Reserve. This, you can see there are some thermal anomalies here, and these thermal anomalies were detected on 14th March 2005. A team was on the ground to check whether these forest fire was really occurring or not. And simultaneously in the lab, a relatively high resolution database of AWIPS was analyzed on that particular to see whether the forest fires are occurring or not. And you can see it is very well we are able to detect the forest fire in these locations, and our field team could really identify the forest fire. So this was one of the earlier works which we did to validate how forest fire can be detected or monitored using coarse resolution, a suite of resolution, and a fine resolution satellite data. And of course, forest fire is dependent on phenology. And as you know, Indian forests are mostly dry, and they shed most of their leaves during month of March till April. And these leaves which are on the ground, or the dried leaves, act as a beautiful fuel and a resource for the fire to occur. In this slide, I'll show you with an animation how during the phenology of this particular region, this is the Nagarjuna Sagar Tiger Reserve, changes with each month. This is December 2003, January 2004, February 2004. You can see that the green areas are the areas where the leaves have already shed. Then you have, this is March, almost leafless condition, and the scars, the dark green scars you have seen are actually the fire scars. These are the areas which have already been burned. And this is April. You can see the amount of fire scars in this region. So this is how we basically monitor the burned area using satellite remote sensing. And yes, how do we identify the active fire locations? This is a MODIS image, and this is a thermal image basically. And what we see, what I have skipped at a circle, are the areas which are the pixels having a thermal anomaly. By thermal anomaly we mean that the particular pixel has a higher temperature compared to its surrounding pixels. And when you can slice it properly, you get the active fire locations. And all these information are there as a web-based assessment and response system. There is INFRAS hosted at National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad. Now what do we need for a perfect forest fire decision support system? For pre-fire, you need a forest fire proneness information as well as forest probable areas of forest fire spread. During fire, you need a daily fire alarm as well as a burnt area assessment, and post-fire, you need the information on ecological damage and mitigation plan. For this, different outputs are continuously being generated by different organizations. The numbers which you see in the small circles represent the different organizations which are carrying on or which are generating the databases, and I'll come to this in subsequent slides. So what we need fire combat plans, we need damage assessment, we need information on fire vulnerability and mitigation. So for doing this, what do we need? For forest fire proneness maps or proneness information, we need information on infrastructure, topography, vegetation type or forest cover, information on fire recurrence, information on biotic pressure, because this is very important as most of the fires in India are caused by this biotic information. Then fire history, and finally the climate. This gives the temporal trends and these gives the spatial trends. Combining both of them, we get a forest fire proneness information. Similarly, for information on forest fire spread, what we need are desiccation or fuel stick values. We need information on the phenology, vegetation types. And for abiotic, weather, soil moisture and topography. And combining this with the proper functions, we get the information on forest fire spread. All these are put into this forest fire decision support system, which gives us information on the forest fire vulnerability and mitigation. For the vulnerability, we get information on the spatial trends, temporal trends, and also information on the prioritization. While with this, we get to identify the location of the watchtowers or the fire lines, where to have a controlled burning or forest floor clearing, and where we can have eco-development plans. Now these are the institutions which we have seen earlier who are involved in generating information on various forest fire for the forest fire decision support system in our country. So now we come to the what information remote sensing and GIS can give during the fire season. I'm making this presentation as first I will be talking about what we are doing when a fire is occurring, then what we can do to predict where the forest fire will occur, and finally after the forest fire has occurred, what all things remote sensing can give for mitigation and development. So as we have talked, for active fire locations, we have MODIS, Terra and Aqua. This has a spatial resolution of 1 kilometer. This forest fire is basically detected in the SWIR and thermal infrared region. It has two revisits daily, one at 10 a.m. and one at 2 p.m. And it has a swath of around 2000 by 2000 kilometers. And we also have another satellite, that is the Defense Meteorological Satellite, DNSP, which has a spatial resolution of 2.5 kilometer and has a spectral channels in visible and outgoing long waves, which it also include infrared and thermal. It has 3 revisits in the evening, one at 6 p.m., one at 8 p.m. and one at 9 p.m. daily, and has a swath of 5,000 kilometers by 5,000 kilometers. Now, for the issues in the operational application, what we need, what is the information we need? We need the detection of forest fire. For the detection, but this also depends on the extent of burning, whether there is a flame or smoke in that, what is the background character, what is the atmospheric interference, if there is any sensor saturation or not, because sometimes when you have a huge amount of radiation coming to the sensor, it gets saturated and it may not be able to detect the fine changes in the thermal region for the forest fire. Then this is also, there is an issue that for every region, the forest fire detection algorithm has to be changed or customized. Then there is an issue of real-time dissemination. Presently, we have a capability of disseminating information in around 15 minutes from the time we get the data. And finally, the feedback mechanism. So these are the daily fire products which we produce as a part of Infras based on MODIS data. This is for the night time using DNSP data, and this is a zoom to a region and have seen in parts of Kerala and Tamil Nadu the locations of the forest fires on a particular. This is an active fire. This is as on February 25th, 2006. Now this is another application which we have. We can also identify the type of forest wherein this the forest fire is occurring. That is, this is a part of Sikkim, and the forest fire location is at this point, which corresponds to the broadleaf hill forest of this region. Using temporal satellite data, we can also identify the forest fire progression. These 3 images, on the left you see is IRS-1D WIPS at 10 hours, then MODIS at 10-14 hours and NOVA at 13-14 hours. You can see how this forest fire is spreading in say around 3 hours. And this is very useful in large episodic fire, wherein you need to monitor its spread both in terms of the amount or the area and the direction in which it is spreading. Now this is the forest fire monitoring during 25th March to 2nd April 2006. And you can see, and these are the dates, the different colors which I have seen, the dots of the different colors are the dates on which it has occurred. And we can also identify the regions where it is very high. And this is mainly due to the shifting cultivation in this region. If we zoom into this, you can see on March 27th, it was this region, This is increased in March 28, 29, 30th, 31st, 1st April and 2nd. And this is an aggregation of all these episodes, forest fire episodes. Now, basically, what we need, these are the burnt area products. These are based on the trigger from the Firewatch report, response from the user department, and direct request from the user department. We basically give this burnt area products to the user departments, the forest departments, to identify the regions where the mitigation has to be carried out. So a typical forest fire watch report gives an information on the location, status of the forest fire, and area which has been burned, and if there is any recurrence of the forest fire in 7 to 10 days. And based on the forest fire watch report, if the trigger score is high for a location, the action will be initiated for proceeding to assess the burnt area by the disaster fire team of its own, apart from the remote sensing based reports. So for burnt area mapping, we need a bit higher resolutions. IRS-AVIS is one of the very good sensors which can give the forest fire burnt area mapping, as it has a revisit of 5 days, and it will also identify the recurrent burnt areas, areas burned due to recurring forest fires. So these are two images. This is for 16th April 2005 and this is 17th April 2005. And you can see that these areas, the new bar, are very well detected in this forest fire. This is also a temporal data set, 22nd January and 6th February. You can see this is a completely healthy vegetation. There is no burnt areas. But here you can see fine scars in this region. Now when we zoom this, we can identify the burnt area scars or burnt scars. And using image processing tools like say simple digital classification, we can extract this burnt images very smoothly. Here, this FCC is composed of SWIR, that is shortwave infrared, NIR, that is near infrared, and red. And you can see using the shortwave near infrared and near infrared, the burnt areas can be identified very accurately. This is another example of burnt area assessment in Rajiv Gandhi National Park, Nagarhole, Karnataka, as on 9th March 2004. These are the areas which are burnt, and we could classify it very easily using standard remote sensing tools, and also get a statistics of the burnt areas in different forest ranges in Rajiv Gandhi National Park. And we have also done it on request from Kerala Forest Department, wherein we have identified the different types of different burnt areas in different forest types. Like the evergreen forest, the burnt area was very less during the different months. This is a cumulative burnt area. In grassland, it is relatively more, but it is very high during the month of March in the deciduous forests. This is also an example of forest fire monitoring in Bandipur Tiger Reserve and Rajiv Gandhi National Park. You can see how the forest fire progressions in the different regions of Rajiv Gandhi National Park and Bandipur Tiger Reserve can be detected. You can see these regions. Now we come to what we can do in the pre-fire scenario. This is interesting because here comes the modeling part. Using the information on the various climatic regimes and the type of forests, we can identify the regions and also many other information. We can identify the regions which are prone to forest fire. So if we compare the temperature regimes, service fire occurrences, that I would say forest fire occurrences, you can see that most of the forest fire occurs in March, when the temperature in the central part of the country is very high, and also in April. But surprisingly, when the temperature is highest during May, the forest fires are relatively less. This is because most of the fuel which were available to burn has already burned during the month of March. And mind you, most of the forest fires in India are generally ground fires. Only in some regions in these Himalayan foothills, that is in Himachal and Uttarakhand, you have some of the ground fires, but mostly it is ground fire. So, when the entire fuel, the ground fuel which is there, burns up in March, there is very less fuel to burn in this region during April, and in May it's almost negligible. If we see in the different biogeographic regions, which are the areas which have highest amount of forest fire, we have northeast hills, but here it is mostly due to traditional shifting cultivation or jhum. Apart from that, the highest is in eastern highlands in the Deccan Peninsula, Central Highlands. Most of the Deccan Peninsula is prone to forest fire, and there is one in the Central Highlands here, and one in the Western Ghats Mountains, this region. And this is mostly in the Western Ghats, this is mostly due to the plantations which are interspersed with the forests, wherein the impact of the anthropogenic factors, that is the clearing of the weeds and other things, results in some of the forest fire occurrences. But mostly you can see it is dry region of the central India which are most prone to the forest fire. So when we had identified the different forest cover-wise distribution of the forest fire, we have seen that the dense forest and the open forest. Open forest has slightly more number of forest fire compared to dense forest, but it's not very much different. While scrub has relatively very less forest fires. As this is very easy to visualize, in evergreen and semi-evergreen, since these are moist regions, we have very less forest fire. While in the deciduous forest regions, the percentage of burnt areas are very high. So almost, say, around 65% of the total amount of burnt area. While scrub forest and degraded forest constitute this around 27 to 28%, and grasslands around 8%. When we identified the temporal variability in the area burnt across the different vegetation types in just Madumalai Wildlife Sanctuary in the Western Ghats from 1989 till 2002, we get this graph wherein the dry deciduous shoria forms showed major amount of burning in this region. And surprisingly, the dry thorn forest, which we had thought would be most prone to burning, had the least amount in the burnt areas, which led us to realize that these forests have evolved in such a way that they generate the least amount of fuel for the burnt areas in this particular region, and hence they have very less amount of burning. This was another interesting observation which we found, that the frequency of forest fire decreases as we go from the edge of the forest. You can see something like 50 meters from the forest edge, the number of frequency of forest fire is maximum across the country. While as we go something like 500 meters from the forest edge, it reduces from 100 to around 50, and it goes in a decreasing fashion. This proves that most of the forest fire is created due to the human activities, wherein the grazers, when they go to the forest edges to graze the cattle, they are the primary source of the forest fire. And sometimes in this region, it is also the vehicular traffic which is cutting through a forest, which also create this sort of forest fires. Another interesting observation were the intensity or the frequency of forest fire from as the distance from the settlement increases, the frequency of forest fire increases till it reaches around 200 or 2000 meters, that is 2 kilometers from the village. The forest fire is maximum, and then it decreases as you go further. This means that this region, it decreases because the forests in these regions are mostly the joint forest management, wherein the villagers have a stake in protection of those forests. Whereas when you go around 2 kilometers, the jurisdiction of the village stops, and there no one is responsible for the occurrence of the forest fire, operation of the forest. It is left only to the forest departments to do the protection, and since the department is stretched very to a huge extent in terms of manpower, they are not able to control it as efficiently as the joint forest management does. So this was another interesting observation. And also the distribution of the locations. Based on all this information, we tried to model it. So there were many parameters which were taken up, like ignition index, topographic index, fire danger index. So what we did, we also took inputs from the MODIS and Terra, wherein the different MODIS products were used to generate the potential surface temperature, modified difference fire index, and perpendicular moisture index for the fuel, which gives us the fire danger index over a particular region. This was the fire danger index over Uttarakhand during 2014, which we checked with the actual fire locations. And you can see these regions which had high amount of, or which had high fire index, danger index, showed high amount of forest fire location. But surprisingly, during June, we had a huge amount of fire in the upper reaches. This was due to an episodic forest fire, which was basically the crown fires. In those particular regions, which were particularly in the southern aspect, in some of the pixels, there was a high intensity of forest fire, high danger index of the fire danger index, and on those locations, these forest fires were occurring. And in this experiment, we found that this fire danger index had an accuracy of around 79%, which can be improved in the future with future work. So we also developed another methodology for fire potential index, wherein potential surface temperature, relative greenness index and moisture index were used to identify the potential fire index. In fact, this model output proved to be better than the previous one, wherein we could identify the regions, and this had an accuracy of around 89%. Using this information on fuel type, flammability, ignition index, topographic index, and digital elevation model, we could identify the final fire danger index. So, to summarize how we can use the remote sensing and GIS for pre-fire inputs or pre-fire identifying the regions prone to fire. If you have a database on the roads, infrastructure, topography, metrology, and vulnerable areas, you can identify the systems for assessing the fire behavior. And when you have these systems for assessing the fire behavior, you can identify the weather conditions, and coupled with ground measurement and satellite imagery, we can have a national fire danger rating system and fire forecasting system. Now we come to what we can do in the post-fire scenario. Burnt area mapping is one of the things which we have already discussed. Identifying which are the regions which are most prone to fire. For example, the deciduous forests of Goa are most prone to fire. Whereas these grasslands of Kerala are more prone to fire than compared to other places. So this gives us the kind of local mitigation plans which should be taken up to assess the fire. Similarly, we have also identified the forest fire burnt area in different states of the Western Ghats. And it was observed that most of the largest burnt areas are Karnataka, while Tamil Nadu had very small areas which were burnt. Then also you identify the regions which have a tendency to have recurrence of the forest fires. This was done in Nagarhole National Park in Karnataka, now presently known as Rajiv Gandhi National Park. And we could identify the regions which were prone to recurrent forest fires. And then based on this information, the park officials could identify suitable measures to take care of the losses due to the recurring forest fire. And they also created the watchtowers which could be used to observe the areas which were prone to forest fire. This is an observation which we had, that as the relative number of species decreased in the forest fire regions, so as the forest fire increases, the species abundance decreased. Also, we see that the age individuals, which are that is the species which form at the edge of the forest, are more prone to forest fires because they create most amount of biomass. All these have an impact on the recurrence of forest fire. Apart from that, forest fire also results in trace gas emission and aerosol emission. So the amount of trace gas and aerosols as well as CO2 and CO and NOx emission from different states as a result of the repeated burning can be assessed, and proper mitigation can be taken. And you can also have a comparative evaluation of the forest fire, episodic forest fire, before and after forest fires. This is the burnt area after advanced burning, and this is burnt area after firefighting operations. So, identification of such regions for forest fire proneness, as well as identification of the areas prone to forest fire and how the various mitigation options which have been taken up results in the impact of the, or results in the protection or preservation of an area can be assessed. And here we have an idea of how, we can get an idea of how a region can recover after an episodic forest fire. So this is just after forest fire, and this is on 29th April 1999, around 1 month after the burning, and the regions which have high rate of recovery and low rate of recovery. So, for post-forest fire scenarios, the ecological damage assessment system, amount or rate of regeneration, amount of trace gas emission and successional cycles can be properly studied, and the actions or mitigation actions can be developed accordingly. And we have also seen that effective participatory mechanism and eco-development plans are necessary for proper mitigation of forest fire. Now I'll just touch upon a few slides on future perspectives. What we need to effectively counter the forest fires. We need data sets, huge amount of data sets, which can help us in relational analysis and also quantification and of the process and modeling. This can have an input on the policy and implementation strategy of the forest fires, which can be passed on to the ground for better management of forest fires. For this, we need enhanced satellite-based management system, a real-time information dissemination, and a multi-institutional programmatic approaches for the damage assessment. For this, we need something which is like sensor web, wherein the different sensors can coordinate among each other and give an input on how or where the forest fire is occurring, and then monitor its progress, and with the information on from the models, it can direct the ground crew to take the proper management plans. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.